Okay, let's get started. I want to honor your time. My name is Jessica Swain-Bradway. I have two last names, in case you were wondering. I am from Midwest Illinois PBIS network. I'm actually originally from New Jersey. I was a high school teacher there. Moved to Oregon about 13 years ago. Never left. Really love it. And one of the things I'm extremely passionate about is our ability to use classroom practices. So this PowerPoint today is set up, we're going to focus on three main classroom practices that you cannot be too good at. They are critical. And the PowerPoint is set up so that you could take this and pull slides and resources out and use it immediately. So please do that, okay? In addition, I have multiple slides embedded that are hot links directly to some really great resources, okay? This will all be much more fun if you ask questions and you have your comments throughout. There are no stupid questions, which is something you've probably said. And if you have that question, someone else has that question. If you don't like to draw attention to yourself, I've heard there are people like that, then you can just email me and I will email you back. And there's a little bit of feedback, so I'm going to try to figure out the best place to stand. So one of the things that the CalTAC team has really, I think, put out there in a big way is to think about your why. What's your why? Why are you part of this work? And what is the why for your district, for your community, for your students? What is important? So I really appreciate Dr. Horner saying, you know, there are different ways to do this. Let's not lose the core features. And I've seen different ways to do it. Focusing on mental health, focusing on restorative practices, focusing on academic rigor. Okay, we can use the PBS framework to achieve those things, and there is no ceiling, right? There's no limit to what we can teach our kids to do if we use the right teaching strategies. So I'm going to skip ahead to this one. You've seen the other slide, and then soon we'll edit out that I said skip that slide. Our agenda is there are two big pieces we're talking about: classroom practices, and then some information on coaching. So how many of you in the room are teachers? Great. How many of you are administrators? We like you too, I promise. How many of you are coaches? Good. Where are my SPED folks? My people. Excellent. Okay. So I taught in a self-contained program in a high school and got to see great stuff. I was called probably the best names ever. And I have a really good poker face. I'd say, maybe that's true, honey. And right now, we're going to do some math. And then I'd go home and I'd say to my friends, guess what my kids called me today? You know, because it was in my 20s, it was hysterical. So we're going to talk about best classroom practices and examples of professional development and coaching. And the bottom line is, in the undercurrent of all of this, you don't actually have school-wide PBS in place unless you have classroom practices in place rigorously in your classroom. Like, a lot. You can count them. You know how many more you gave the next day. You know how many more she needs versus he needs. This is it of teaching. It's the it. And if you were a kindergarten teacher, you would be taught how to do all these things and have little groups running around the room. What I actually want you to do is channel your inner kindergarten teacher. Because the teaching practices we tell kindergarten teachers to use, because those children are 5, are actually the strategies we need to use with middle school kids, high school kids, and graduate students, okay? And it is how we teach everything we want children to learn. I'm going to use an example of trauma. Kiddos who have been exposed to high levels of trauma and have trauma-based needs learn how to identify, they need to know how to identify their triggers, be taught replacement behaviors, and get reinforcement for using those. Okay, so teaching, practicing, and reinforcing are strategies that we use in various iterations, in various shapes and flavors, for everything we want people to know. And don't worry, if you believe in intrinsic motivation, over time, if you practice enough, those things become internalized. Okay? So let's go. I really would like you to have authentic engagement. And I have a very funny side story. I one time wrote about authentic engagement in a chapter for school-based mental health. It was an international book. And the editor tore me apart for using the word authentic. And now it's popular again. So I feel a little vindicated. Because he said the beginning of the chapter read like the intro to a Disney movie. And I thought, if you're an academic, that's really a slight, but I love Disney, so that was great. I want you to jot down, highlight, or copy, or something, the details that stand out to you, that link to your why. I want you to write those things down, okay, as we go through, and ask about them. Any folks doing restorative practices or thinking about it? Okay, I love this. One of the things I get to do is I am collaborating with the International Institute of Restorative Practices in a few large districts around the country right now, and we're blending PBS and restorative practices. We're having a blast. We're in Louisville, Kentucky. It's obviously the largest school district in Kentucky. Things are going really well. When you think about the social discipline window, and this is how we operationalize and where we want to kind of group our behaviors toward each other, there's this with quadrant that represents high caring and high support. And something I want you to think about if you're using restorative practices or thinking about it, best classroom practices help us get to that with. Because when we use best classroom practices, we're giving away the responsibility. I do, we do, you do. Do with, no, do for, do with, cheer on, however you want to envision that. We can use best practices to help us get to that with quadrant where we are walking with our colleagues and children to get to the desired way we're going to treat each other, the way we've talked about in our expectations. Because those school-wide expectations, as much as the person from New Jersey in me wants to tell everybody what to do, the person in me that has been transformed to Eugenian realizes that we'll get much further if we work together on this. School-wide expectations are often created so that we tell kids how they make teachers happy. And I need you to set that aside, because they're actually humans too. And they will be much more willing to work with you if they actually like you, and you treat them with respect, and you're super obvious about it. So, you know, teenagers, between the ages of 12 and like 30, some of us, maybe past 30, operate primarily with our amygdala, our emotional response portion of our brain, because our prefrontal cortex is not yet fully developed. So our kiddos need high levels of structure to move them into the right part of the brain. They need to repeat and repeat and repeat, okay? Another thing I want to talk about is classroom practices and IEPs. PBIS isn't just for kids in special ed, and there really should be no distinction between special ed and general ed district administrators. IEDEA requires, our law, special ed law requires that evidence-based practices are what we are using to engage our kids who have special learning needs. And you know what? All of the things we're going to talk about today have a very strong research base. Guess what? These practices also help those kids that are in that sea of ineligibility. They're not there. It also helps the kids who just show up and they just broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, and they really need help get structured. These practices actually were first tested by Ziggy Engelman and Doug Carnine with kids that had typical learning needs, typical learners, and their growth, like this, accelerated. And they said, we're onto something. We need to use this to boost the learning of kiddos that are behind for some reason or other from their peers. Okay, so the TFI. Folks use the TFI, Tiered Fidelity Inventory? And you can just nod if you don't know what I'm talking about. Yes, Jessica, we do. They told us you'd ask, and we're supposed to nod. Jessica's going to come through and ask about school-wide expectations today. What are you going to say? There is one item at Tier 1 on the TFI that asks about classroom practices. And yet this is the core of school-wide PBS. Everything else we do is make this happen. It's all about the interactions we have with our children because they are our learners, okay? So there are different, you know, there's a walkthrough tool for this. I'm going to give you resources today to go to that actually would break down and give you a quick and easy observation or self-assessment for each of the classroom practices I'm talking about. Okay, so you can kind of blow that up. So we're really going to unpack this item. Best practices. We have 3 best practices we're going to talk about. Opportunities to respond, OTR is how I will refer to it. error correction. It turns out screaming at children actually doesn't correct the errors, and specific praise, okay? And I want you to think about the way we correct learning errors, like academic errors, and the way that we correct social errors. And if you've seen me present before, I have this, I'm going to make this video at some point in time, of like a kid making a math mistake and like trig, and the teacher losing their mind. I've had enough of this misapplication of that rule. Who do you think you are? Who raised you? Right? The way we do when it's like a social behavior we've just had enough of, I think would be hysterical. So here you'll notice that within the PowerPoint, there are a bunch of hot links to take you to a ton of resources. Okay, these are my top favorites. This one right here, this classroom page, that is my network's page. We have developed one-page summaries of every classroom practice and more that I'm going to talk about today. We call them snapshots, and actually came from Mid-Atlantic. PBS developed them. They're very easy to use. And there's a section, you could literally like just chop it in quarters, and there's a self-assessment section. You could also use it as a walkthrough tool if you're a coach. And for all my research nerds out there, yay, at the bottom, there's a list of the citations and the research articles that you could use. So if you're a superintendent saying, is this evidence-based? You can say, well, yes, ma'am, here's the list. Okay, so I'm not gonna talk through all of these as we get past them. I'll just tell you, here it is, but now you know. Oh, one more. This one here is instructional video. So Terry Scott, Dr. Terry Scott is one of my favorite folks to listen to talk about classroom strategies. There are 2 links here that will take you to videos he's helped co-produce. They are really quick and easy and accessible, and districts are using them for training, because this information isn't going to be any good if you just keep it in your head when you leave, okay? This is one of my favorite guidebooks. You've probably seen this if you have worked with the CalTAC group. It is on, I think it's the OSEP website, but it gives you examples and non-examples of how to use these strategies at the elementary and secondary levels, okay? It's another great resource. So that's enough of that stuff. Learning has to be visible. Behavior means learning means the behavior has changed. You couldn't do it before, and now you can. And you don't know if someone's behavior has changed unless you see it. There's no quiz today, I promise, but that would be one of the easiest ways for me to see if you've learned some of the things I've talked about when we leave, right? So if a kiddo if you can't see their thinking, you have to come up with another way to do this. You have to make it out there, right? Kids who are struggling may hide. They may hide by putting their head down. They may hide by acting out, right? Learning has to be visible. That is what I want you to go back, everybody write down. It's what I want you to go back every time. Administrators, when a teacher comes to you and say, I'm having this problem, I want you to say, I'm sorry, if I can read your name tag, you're part of the presentation. Michael, you're telling me you're having this problem with this kid. How did you make that learning visible? Tell me how you made that learning visible. That could be one question as an administrator or as a team or as a peer that could change the dynamics of your academic and social instruction. Okay? Done. I'm kidding. I'm not really done. But that would be fine if I was just like, I'm out, you guys. Give me a high score. If you can't see it, you can't correct it or praise it. Now I'm going to talk trash on homework for a minute, and you can give me an amen if you agree. Please stop sending homework home that kids can't do with 95% accuracy on their own.
Agree.
Yes, thank you. My daughter's middle school teachers haven't quite figured out exactly what I do yet. And by the way, my kids' teachers love me. I'm just throwing it out there. They don't love me at all. But my daughter comes home and she's struggling on her homework. And by the way, my daughter has given me explicit permission to use her in examples. But like 2 years ago, she said, Mom, if you really want to use me in your presentations, that's fine. I was like, well, good, because I've been doing it since you were born. She comes home with homework, and she's practicing. She has to staple it in a packet and hand it in on like the next Monday, okay? And the teacher very smartly has this grading rubric on the front. Is it neat? Did you use your name on it? You know, etc. But then she doesn't get any feedback on that. So if I'm not sitting there, or her father isn't sitting there, or we're not having her go in and check, she's essentially practicing wrong the entire week, the whole time. How long do your kids go before they get feedback on their work? And you know what? You're not a superhuman. I mean, you are, but you're not, we're not. We have to sleep, it turns out. It's really good for you. So you'll have to think about, as we're going through this, I want you to think you're gonna have to change some things in the way you structure the work your children do. Because you cannot possibly read and give immediate feedback on 30 to 120 5-page essays. That does not work. What can I do, Jessica? Well, I'll give you this idea. They could use a grading rubric and give themselves a score. They could trade. These two very smartly, they flipped their name tags when I said, if I can read your name. You can have them grade each other's with a rubric and say, yours is good in this way because, yours is good in this way because. Wow, that's a lot of work that those kids did for you. Why are we working so hard? We want leaders, let's treat them like leaders, okay? If you can't see it, you can't do any of the teaching part. You're simply an orator. Oh, look at me, I talk, and you all look at me because you have to. You get an ODR if you don't, right? So we have to see it so we can change it, or we can say good job and accelerate and jump to the next thing, right? Okay, here are the 3. I just talked about them. I just talked about this too. You're gonna have to change some of what you do. And I would encourage you, if you are super excited about this, go find the best elementary school in your school district and spend the day watching that person and see what they do. Because you will get ideas and you won't have to reinvent any of that. It's right there in front of you. Okay, I already said that too. So let's talk about it. Why does it say welcome? I thought it was just this is what happens when you download stuff from the internet. At least it just says welcome. Okay. I want you to think about this. I want you to look at these. I'll read them out loud because I like to do that. So I want you to think about and write it down. How much time passes between students receive information and when you can see their learning, when you know if they understand, okay? How long do they go before they get feedback? And then this last one, how much do we measure pre-skills versus assume they have already been learned? Just whatever one of these questions spoke to you, like, oh yes, that's a good question. Just jot down something on that. I'm gonna give you a few seconds, and then we ask you to turn and talk to each other, and then I'll ask for 3 volunteers who are brave enough to share what they talked about. So if you know what I'm asking you to do, please give me a thumbs up. If you're kind of clear, give me a thumbs sideways. If you're not sure, give me a thumbs down. And you could do it like this. So I will restate. Pick one of these that really speaks to you or you've thought about, or that you're just willing to think about right now. And jot down some notes on it. When you're done, turn and talk to the person next to you. When I want to bring us all back together, I'm going to count down loudly backwards from 5 using my dog, you better get over here voice, because I have a large dog who likes to run away. And then we'll share out. Does that sound good? Okay, please talk. Okay, this might be an exercise you could use with your team or staff to broach this subject. I'd like first if we could get 3 folks to volunteer what you talked about. I'll smile really big and say thank you. Look at me.
I'll break the ice.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, all right. So we just talked about how long students should go before they get feedback or correction. And I was an English teacher for 16 years, and so that's a lot of feedback giving.
Yes, it is.
Before they.
It turns out they're not good writers. I don't know what happened.
I know, I was cheated. So, we talked about have them write 4 times more than you actually grade, so they're getting practice. That's still a struggle for an English teacher because it's like, what if they're doing it wrong 4 times over without the feedback? So, Stephen was talking about peer grading. That
Yep.
was kind of hard for me to release too until I got to where I was teaching like a real structured type of scaffolded essay,
Mm-hmm.
and that was easier for peers to give
Yes.
feedback.
That's a great point. So the more structured your teaching approach is, that scaffolded essay was her example, the easier it is for peers to give feedback. If kids are going to give each other feedback, don't they have to be masters and fluent in that content? Oh yeah, you're really stepping it up, right? You wanted to share?
I shared from a parent's perspective of a daughter that is struggling in the new math and
Aren't we all?
takes a test and doesn't get it back for a week.
Yes.
And then the unit test is that same week. So it's very frustrating as a mom
Yes.
to try to help her strengthen her skills before the test.
Yes, getting tests back way whenever and not going over that test. Like there's some classes where teachers give the test back, immediately go back over it, have the kids practice more, right? And then sometimes they have the option to retake it, which I'm a fan of.
Do you guys as parents feel comfortable talking to the teachers about your concerns? And
Oh, yes.
It's a must.
She asked if we as parents felt comfortable talking about our concerns.
The lady that just spoke,
Yeah.
did she talk to the teacher about it? Because I know as a teacher, I would appreciate parents giving their concerns.
You're actually a rarity, and I would like to give you a prize. And I'm sorry to say that. I hear all the time, we can't engage parents. And I'm a parent showing up and really seeing how shut down I get at many, many steps of the way. And it is a shame. You're not actually engaging parents, guys. You're not actually doing that.
I actually have talked to the teacher, but it's awkward because it's one of my schools that I coach, so it's a very
Mhm.
fine line of being an employee of the district and working with the teacher.
It is a double-edged sword to be a parent and know what you know about teaching and positive behavior supports. It is good and bad. And you know what? This is crazy. So Rob Horner and I live in the same school district. They don't even want to listen to Rob about this stuff. So I stopped being I do advocacy work sometimes, and I work with law firms in town and do some gratis work. And so I stopped with that hat, and I'm just the angry mom. And the angry mom gets way more results, unfortunately. So I've seen some schools where they actually can pull it off and they do a good job and they listen and they say thank you because that was really helpful information. But my overall experience, professionally and personally, is that I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. I actually had a teacher tell me I should probably just be a little tougher on my child with crippling anxiety. Yes. No, yes. And that should be everyone's reaction, but that wasn't her reaction. Okay, these are things I want you to consider as we go throughout, because I'm going to share some strategies of how you can start doing these things. And you all have excellent ideas about how to do these things, okay? So as people are sharing, I want you to ask their information. Yes?
It hit me when you said the thing about kindergarten, because every kindergarten teacher who's lasted more than a year is usually great, because you
Yes.
just die in kindergarten if
Right.
you're not. And they're just the best teachers I see consistently, and they do all it's immediate feedback, like everything on this reflection is something that I see.
Right, because our kindergartners, everything is outward. Externalize. It's very big. And you have no choice, unless you want to literally have them kill you, but to say, oh, can we do this time? Good job, I like how you did that. Oh my gosh, that was great. Well, our teens are quieter and they pretend they don't want our attention. They pretend because they actually like it, most of them. We want to think about the fact that they are basically toddlers in large bodies. They are toddlers in large bodies. And we often assume that they have pre-skills, we don't measure them, and then we get mad at them because they didn't know the thing that someone didn't teach them. They didn't know what someone didn't teach them. It really struck me when Rob said, don't correct something unless you've taught it. Our response always needs to be, teach it. That is always our response. So remember I said before, administrators, I want you to say, how did you make the learning visible? You could also say, how did you teach it? Show me. I want you to show me. My son, I'm really, really proud of how far I've come with my kiddos. I feel bad for my daughter. She's 11. She was my first, you know. I just feel bad. I was making so many mistakes. My 6-year-old, I knew I had done it when he was like, he asked for pizza for breakfast, which was great. I'm like, top-notch mom. And then he said he was doing something he wasn't supposed to be, and I gave him a look, and he goes, let me try that again for you. And I was like, yes, it's happening. It's happening. It keeps me from getting really angry. It keeps me getting from as angry as my dad. Great dad. Really angry. So it gives me my go-to strategy. Can you show me that again? Can you explain how we could do that differently? That could be our go-to, and then we save ourselves all kinds of like our heart rate going up, watch it on our Fitbit. Ever watch your Fitbit heart rate when you get angry, people? It's great. Okay. I'm glad some of you appreciate my odd sense of humor. Let's talk about dosage for a minute. Because if you aren't seeing behaviors change, you don't have the dosage right. That's it. They don't have enough opportunities to respond, or they're not getting enough feedback in a timely manner, or they're not getting enough praise. They're not getting the reinforcement that's meaningful to them. Okay? So if things aren't changing, one of these is not at the right intensity. That's it. This is not rocket science. You are going to have to put some things down that you've thought about, or that strategies you've used in the past because they were successful in one way, shape, or form. Okay? Because some of those strategies are successful for a lot of kids. Some of them are just successful for 1 or 2 kids. When we say they're not successful, then we blame the kiddo, as opposed to saying, how do I dose this up? And I like the term dosage because it makes me think of medication. Are you taking the right type of medication? Are you taking the right amount of medication? Okay? And you're never going to hurt anyone if you give them more than they need with this. Medication, on the other hand, don't do that. I've heard there are rules against that. But for learning, we're not going to hurt our kids from them having too many opportunities. In fact, they're just going to show us sooner that they know, and we can move on to the next thing. Okay, so I want you to think about this question. You can put this in your pocket if you need to convince people. If you had to know French fluently in 16 weeks, your success and ability to move on to the next level in your career demanded that you speak French fluently. How much practice would you need? And would you be able to do that if you had that practice for 45 minutes a day for 16 weeks? Or would you need a higher dosage of practice? Higher dosage of practice. Absolutely. I want you to pretend that what your kids are learning is the equivalent of this. Like if I said in 45 minutes, I want all of you to be masters at structural equation modeling, some of you would leave right now, right? If we want our kids to be fluent at it, we have to give them lots of practice. And really the only thing I care that your kids can do fluently, honestly, is that they can be decent human beings and have good social skills. That's what I care about as somebody who does research in social science, and that's what I care about as a citizen of my community. If kids can have a conversation and disagree with each other and they know where to access resources, they are better off than most of us in this room right now. And we can feel humble about that. It's okay, just, yes, Jessica, that's not me. I'm very good at social skills. Okay, opportunities to respond. Here is defined. Throughout the PowerPoint, some of these headers are hot linked to take you directly to resources, okay? So an opportunity to respond is a teacher behavior that prompts or solicits a response from kiddos, but it's a visible response. So you see them writing down, they're moving their body around the room, they're using their words, they're moving manipulative, etc., okay? It is whoever the teacher is. It could be a kiddo creating an opportunity to respond for other kiddos, right? But it is, as I throw my earring on the ground, it is something that is going to solicit making that learning visible. And it is okay for kids to write things down. You walk around the room, you're like, yes. You have the right book open, yes. Yes, good job, you can do that. Okay? Here's our rationale. Now, providing opportunities to respond is correlated with a lot of good things we really want as teachers. And I don't have to belabor this. I want you to see that there's a resource, and this is important for our high school folks. They'll say, well, our learners don't need that. Yes, they do. There's actually scientifically validated correlations between on-time behavior, decreasing disruptive behavior, increased in rates of positive feedback, efficiency of instructional time. And here are all the research, good research articles you can go to. The Carnine 1976 is one of the first most compelling that we have. Okay? It's been around for a long time. And we're not all like chanting about it. Walking down the hallways in the morning as teachers. OTRs, OTRs. Not happening. Okay, so I want you to take another few minutes here, and I want you to think about what would be a compelling why for your staff on thinking about being reflective and being accountable for opportunities to respond. What do they care about? What do they need to hear? Okay, think about their why. You can write it down, share and talk with a peer, and then I'll bring you back together again by using my dog voice. Okay? You're all thinking really hard right now, or you're just tired. It's okay. I'm a little tired, but I'm in my same time zone, so that's good. Go ahead. Okay, let's come back together, please. In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You're getting more excited because it took you longer to come back, which is good. Now, I realize 2 minutes is not enough time, but I only have another little bit. Not a little bit, but okay. What did you talk about? What's the why? What would be appealing to your staff? And you might not have a fully articulated why yet. You might get one as we go through and have more examples. Who would be willing to volunteer? We'll just do one this time, so you don't just stand there looking at me. I'm going to stand up here until you're ready. Yes, thank you.
So, being a middle school teacher for a long time, and working with a lot of high school people, it's always the issue of time. We don't have time, there's so much content, we don't have time, how do we do those things?
Right.
So you need to get the information. And recently, a training where she said that the person who's doing the talking is one doing the learning,
Yes,
and the person doing the grading is the one doing the learning.
yes.
So I think if I were to go back to my classroom tomorrow, I would flip the time spent on, if this was reaching this learning target, this is what it would look like. Let's talk about how did you get there? What was your answer? How did you get that? And the
Right.
time spent would be on self-regulation, self-assessment. What did I do? What was my thinking process? So they can then, when you ask them to help be graders, they are able to do that because that's the time that you spend.
Right.
And because of the information age that we live in, teach them those skills to then go get some of that content.
Right.
And the time you spend is just flipped on
Right.
what you're doing so that they become those learners.
That's excellent. So people will say, I don't have time. What I've had high school teachers say to me is, I'm on track to have this taught by the end of the year. And I say, are your children on track to have learned it by the end of the year? Because that's actually what's supposed to be going on. So administrators, I want that to be your message. That's the message I want your teachers to hear 1,000,000 times, because they've heard 1,000,000 times already that they're not on track to teach things. And they're feeling a lot of pressure. And so if we flipped the amount of time, so she said the person doing the talking and doing the grading is the person who's learning. That is true. That is true. I have 1,000,000 thoughts when I share and I talk, and it's like, oh, all these things start to come together, and I've been doing this for 15 years, and it still works for me. So that was really great. Let's talk about how to increase opportunities to respond. I want you to do a few things. I want you to identify when kids are sitting and getting. In your mind right now, you know when they're sitting and getting, okay? I want you to think about when there are only a few kids raising their hand. Johnny, put your hand down. We know you got it. Good job, Johnny. You got it. I use Johnny because Johnny's usually the bad kid, so I replaced him, and now he's the good. Okay. I want you to find There are two easy ways. Hold on. You want to replace this single student responding with hand raising to options that make everyone's learning visible. Okay? So all students responding in a choral response may seem hokey and stupid, but you will easily discern who's just going instead of actually saying the answer, right? Or who's not responding. And let's get real honest for a second. You know the kids that aren't getting it. They're not like invisible. They try to make themselves invisible. You already know the kids that need higher rates of OTRs. You already know the kids that know it. It doesn't take long for those kids to differentiate themselves. And if you have communication from your feeder middle schools, you can get that information there as well. Okay? So kids with additional needs need higher numbers of opportunities to respond. So I want you to think about equity. Which kids get the highest number of opportunities to respond to corrective feedback and praise statements? Kids who already know it. Kids who look like you. The kids that you like. I love it when people say, our relationships with kids are so good. We're so good at that. And then I say, well, how are your classroom strategies? Because you cannot have success with your entire school and those kids who need the most support unless you're using those classroom strategies as well. And what I see is that in places where they say our classroom strategy, or our relationships are so great, I see hardly any classroom strategies in place. They're relying on the strength of their relationships. We're not all really good at discerning who we have the strongest relationships with. Yes?
And some of those kids that are struggling the most are the ones that have learned to be invisible.
Yeah.
The L-TELs, the E-Ls, like I'm not going to say anything, I'll smile. And,
Yes.
but I don't know the content. I haven't learned it, but I've learned to be very invisible and to cope.
Yes, that's a great point. There are kids who are working really hard to make themselves invisible or just look like they have good teacher-pleasing behaviors. I smile, not yes, because they don't know it, right? I want you to actually embrace, not literally, I want you to embrace, figuratively, the children that need more support. And I want you to challenge yourself with working with those kids that you're like, I don't know what to do. And in order for you to understand that there are kids who are on purpose making themselves visible, you need to look at what they're doing on a regular basis for every skill you want them to learn, for all the content you want them to learn. You have to be tuning in. You can't wait till midterms and say, well, what the hell, Jessica's missing like 5 assignments. She's gotten 40% on all of her tests. That doesn't work. Our kids need the opportunities and to be set up to be successful every hour that they are in your building. Because most kids, even our best kiddos, are already partially at the door, thinking about where they're going next, the shoes they're gonna, wear, how they get around the internet blocker at their parents' house. They're already on their way out. So we have to set them up for success. So I want you to think about administrators. What's your policy for makeup work? What's that policy? Because right now you are cutting kids down at the knees immediately. You have hard punitive rules in place because there are a handful of kids you don't know how to deal with. You don't know what to do to get them engaged. And so you go American on them. You say, we're just going to punish the hell out of them. Oh, I just said it. Yeah. And I even got a wow. That was great. The socialist part of my family is going to be really excited about that. So here are examples. There are this general slide, and then there are specific stuff that comes up later. And what I'm going to do is use those same examples for error correction, okay? So that it's the same, okay. So you can use response cards. You can actually have them have index cards, different colored index cards, whiteboards, electronic boards. Apps are for the apps for responding as long as you can see it. The apps are fine, okay? Cola responses, nonverbal responses, turn and share and write options. Those are some very generic. Okay? Agree with a friend. Vote on the best answer. This group learns this part, jigsaw. You know jigsaw? Somebody said to me the other day, I don't know what jigsaw is. I was like, oh, come on. You've been around longer than that. You know what that is. So here's a really concrete one example. This is a learning line. Now you need to have some evidence your children know what they're doing. You don't throw new content into a learning line. And for the kids who you know will not get it right away because they need additional support, for whatever reason they need the additional support, your job is to set them up for success before they do things like this. If you want more kids to raise their hand, then you say, Arthur, I must be doing good because Arthur flipped his name tag around. You say, Arthur, can you explain number 15? And Arthur does a great job. And you're like, oh, you are the number 15 expert right now. I want you to go up there. You're going to do number 15 on the board, and if people have a hard time, they're going to come to you. Okay? Now, Jessica needs more teaching. You go over, and now you have to go kindergarten because you can't just go over and hang out with Jessica for 2 seconds and they're like burning things down. So you say, Jessica, I'm going to explain the steps again. You're going to explain the steps back to me. You're going to do this practice one. I'm going to come back and check because we're going to move into the learning line next, and I want to know that you have it. Now get worried for a minute that you will have more than one Jessica in your classroom. And I am saying to you, I need you to find a way to get to all the Jessicas to make sure she understands number 15. Now, can you partner Jessica with Arthur? Yes, but please teach Jessica first and don't make Arthur do it by himself. Okay? And then Arthur's the content expert for 15. He's going to stand up there for number 15. Jessica stands up with him. Arthur says, hey, this is step 1 and 2. Jessica, what's step 3? She says, this is step 3. Okay? You're going to have to teach Arthur and I how to work together. So think of these soft skills that come into it. This learning line, you face your partner. There's a question. Give kids think time, please. Give kids and grown-ups think time. Then they share. We limit the response. Next spot. If you wanted to do practice or studying as a team, as a class before a test, this might be a nice way to do that. Okay? Now they're moving, they're talking. It's funny because they're going to make faces at each other. Right? What are the things, just throw it out there, what are the things you will have had to teach them if you want this to be successful? What do you have to teach them? You guys have an eyes on me signal? Because I've been in 4th grade classrooms where they didn't have an eyes on me signal. It's my daughter's 4th grade classroom. I said, Teacher Brian, how are you going to get the kids to stop talking and look at you? And he's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. So he was actually a teacher that, he actually did enjoy my company, one of them. And then he said he would go class, and they would say yes, yes. It was really sweet. They have to have an eyes on me. We're going to transition into this. We're going to transition back to our seats. You have to teach those things. And you teach them by giving them opportunities to respond, corrective feedback, and praise. I've actually had high school teachers teach kids how to come in the classroom. Oh, guys, we're going to try that again. Let's go out. We're going to come back in. Yes?
I was going to say, I've had to teach my seniors and give them the actual instruction that they must look at each other with eye contact and shake their hand and use their first name.
Yeah.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. Hi, how are you today? I'm so-and-so, and then the activity can begin.
I love it, because they don't do it. They say, they go, hi.
Yep.
How are you? Hi. Oh, yeah. You know, they do that thing. I make the best, like, teenage voices. It's great. Okay. Here's closed reading. Okay. There's actually, and there's, like, I think there's links in here on the next slide, or another slide. So the teacher stops periodically mid-sentence. The students can say the next word in unison. Or what I used to do with my kiddos is I would popcorn, and I would say, Arthur. And then Arthur would read. And what we could do is in my classroom, kids could read as long or as short as they wanted. Think about how important that is. Think about how important that is. Kiddos could literally read one word and then popcorn to a friend, okay? And my kids thought it was hysterical. They would try to fool me all the time. And so I'd be moving around the room and doing stuff, and then they'd go, Bradley. And I'd know, and they're so mad. They were so mad. It just drove me. I know I'm in your way, I'm sorry. It just drove me, because I'm very competitive. So then the teacher continued reading. The teacher could also ask a question. You could also stop and ask a question that requires a one-word response, right? So there are different ways to embed the reading practice and really just staying engaged, like I know which sentence we're actually on, okay? And you could also do it to ask questions. Now, if it's in blue, it's because I added it or expanded it. It wasn't actually how it was described on the website. Response cards. You can have red, green, and yellow cards just because we're PBS. Kids could hold up a card when you're at a concept, and they could even do it like this, right? That gives you immediate feedback as to where they are. Yep, full steam ahead. Let's go. Kids will have to feel comfortable actually admitting how they feel, which means you should know their first name, know something about them, greet them at the door, look in their eyes when you're talking to them. All those things that make us human beings. You might actually have to like them because they know. They know. Okay. So variations of that are thumbs up, down, sideways, or I have a friend who does this with graduate students because the classes are huge. So she has a card and it has A, B, C, and D on it. And she'll flash a slide up for a response. And you hold it so she can read the letter. And then she may say, you're absolutely right. Can you please explain why? Or, okay, I want you to turn to your neighbor and explain how, blah, 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 right? So embedding all of these opportunities. Think, pair, share. We know what this looks like, okay? And then here's a bunch of technology-based opportunities to respond websites. Technology, it can be engaging and it's really easy to get off track. It turns out there are other websites online that are like fun. So it's easy to get off track. You need high levels of supervision, active supervision, which means walking around the room and looking at people. And there has to be a way for them to get immediate feedback. So some of these programs have branching logic, where if you get something wrong, it'll loop you back. Or that's the kind of technology you want to be using, okay? Okay, error correction. Remember I said yelling at kids, like, sometimes it's fun, but it doesn't actually change their behavior. I grew up in New Jersey, like we yell. I was running yesterday, and people were honking their horn, and it startled me at first because I live in Eugene. Nobody honks their horn in Eugene. It's like you ran over their dog if you honk the horn at someone in Eugene. People were honking, and I was like, oh, I feel like I'm in New Jersey again. This is really great. Angry drivers. Okay. So here's an error correction. Here's a definition. This is very important to define for your teachers and your staff. An error correction isn't saying, no, where'd you get that idea? I see you didn't read. Okay, that's not error correction. It's an informative statement immediately after the behavior that you would like to redirect or replace, okay? It's brief. There's actually research on the length of the error correction is inversely related to the results of the error correction. So the longer you talk at children, the less likely it is that they will change. I needed to have sent that to my parents when I was like 5, because you can't keep talking and talking and have it change. So it's immediately after the naughty behavior, right? That naughty trigonometry error. It's brief. It tells the kiddo what they're doing incorrectly, what to do differently, and then it's immediately followed by an invitation to practice. Okay? Immediately followed by an invitation to practice. That is often what people forget. Okay? I'm going to do, here's my walking feet example, and then I'm going to go backwards. So here's walking feet. I love walking feet. It just makes me chuckle. Can I see your walking feet? Okay? So here's an example for smaller kiddos, and then I'll give a high school example, okay? So, oh, that isn't the safe way to go. This is my elementary school teacher voice. I actually have this not-so-secret dream of being a kindergarten teacher. It would be so much fun. Okay, oh, that isn't the safe way to go down the hallway. You were running and worried you'll get hurt. You know, you'll get hurt, something. We're gonna stay safe by walking, okay? So can you please show me walking feet the rest of the way? I didn't say make them come back and do it again, because that is shaming everyone. Come back here right now and show me the right way. Nope. So can you the rest of the way, can you just show me those walking feet? So I know that you're staying safe, because that will make me thank you very much. Okay? I said that's not what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're supposed to be doing. Show it to me. Good job. Okay? We want to have all of those components. And why? The way we speak with children, okay, so systematic, here are our data. consistent corrections are those superior to those delivered inconsistently. Are there any rules in your high school that some teachers enforce and some teachers don't? It's just never. I've never heard that. Never. You are undermining your peers' influence and support of children when you are not consistent. And if you can't find consistency across grades, then all 9th grade teachers make some agreements. All 10th grade teachers make some agreements. All English teachers make some agreements. Okay? You are putting your children and your peers under a tremendous cognitive load when they're learning new content and new social interactions and new teacher expectations every classroom they go into. Okay? That is terrible. It's like learning completely different things everywhere you go, all the time. You're bombarded. We know that exclusion and punishment are ineffective at producing long-term reduction. Whose behavior does sending a kid out of the room reinforce? Teachers. Johnny is out. Thank God. Man, I also want you to acknowledge that teachers need respite sometimes because they are working really hard. And if their strategies aren't working, I would actually rather a kiddo take a break and a teacher take a break so that no one is feeling devalued. Okay? That's fine. When my daughter was 3, here comes a child story. She was a really hard time and I was just getting so angry and I didn't want to be angry. So I went into the bathroom and I'm holding the door. She's on the other side of the door, banging on it and yelling. And I'm like, Mommy's taking a time out right now. You know, I knew where she was. She was right on the other side of the door and I needed a break because I wanted to come out and say, let's try that again. I'm gonna take deep breaths and we'll try that again, okay? So we know that exclusion and punishment are ineffective and we want to keep them at an absolute minimum, okay? If I'm a kiddo and I'm freaking out, it's okay for me to have a space to chill and feel valued that I decided to express what I needed. We think about how often we tell kids it's not okay to be human. Why are you crying? This doesn't call for that kind of response. They're a human having a human response. And as long as we're not hurting other people, breaking stuff, isn't that okay? Through lots of therapy, I've learned it's okay to cry. And I do it openly. People will be like, what's wrong? I'm like, I'm just venting my emotions. It's good for me. Yes?
There are some days when our students just aren't going to be engaged in learning. Usually it's when it's sunny outside, it smells like spring.
Yes. Yes, when it's sunny outside.
I teach board classes. I teach business stuff. So I have an intro to apps class because they're really killing now, right? So it's sunny outside, it smells like spring, and they cannot concentrate. I have a Ferris wheel, 9th graders and 10th graders. So I just took them outside, and we did a ice-breaking thing. Some of them didn't even know they've been in there for half a year and don't know each other's names and how old they are. And so it was a good opportunity to take them outside because it was fun to be, can you stay in your seat? Can you just focus
Yep.
on, I didn't want to do the continual refocus.
Yeah, no, it's too much.
It's like, everyone has a day, everyone has a day.
That is brilliant, because if we know our kids are already going to be disengaged, think about right before a break or right after a break. Why aren't we investing in social skills? Why aren't we doing just that thing where we're giving them the opportunity to practice being a social, pro-social human being with others? That's a great way to use the time. And it's easier for us. It's okay. We can teach things and make it easier for us. And if they know each other well, aren't they going to be able to work better together when you say it's group work time? Right? It's going to reduce some of the drama in your classroom. So think about the times across your year where that type of thing, additional opportunities to respond and get corrective feedback in social interactions, right? In social interactions. That's brilliant. Everyone write down. Write down. I'm going to check. I'm not checking. I'm very negligent teaching here. So we have two slides on rationale. I really like avoiding power struggles. That's so important. You're the grown-up, supposedly. You are the grown-up. And we are modeling for them all the time, whether or not we want to be. We are. They're looking at how we deal with this, okay? Brief error corrections are much more effective than longer error corrections. There's that citation, Abramowitz, O'Leary, and Futtersack, 1988, if you want to go there. And Laurie Newcomer has done some things about, some research on avoiding power struggles and avoiding sarcastic redirections. Now, I love sarcasm. It's not the way to manage children when they're having a hard time. Can you be the sarcastic teacher and you joke with your kids and they joke back with you? Absolutely. That is great. But saying, haven't done your homework again, I'm not surprised. That's not the best way to use sarcasm. And if you were like me, when I was, let me see what time it is. When I was in high school, I had to laugh when Rob said something about fairness, because I would surprisingly openly challenge my teachers when they would be rude to us as a class. And sometimes people didn't like that, a teenage girl telling them what to do. So it didn't work. I had teachers that were sarcastic and I thought it was rude, and so I said so. But if we're trying to create connections, if you're sarcastic with one kid, another kid who may need that connection with you is not going to speak up. Why would I draw attention to myself? So we're shutting down our kiddos' ability to learn and interact when we are being snarky, sarcastic, and when we're just shutting them down versus actually teaching them the right way, right? Our response should always be teaching. It's actually in our job title, teacher. So here's another step-by-step, okay? So you can reference it. Please highlight to embed additional opportunities to respond for something if they don't get it. It includes the social stuff. If they don't get it, you go back. Anybody use direct instruction for reading to teach reading? Some of you do. Some states we're like, that's the worst. I would like us to think of all of our structuring our behavior like direct instruction reading, if that makes sense to you. What word is this cat? What word is this cat? Great, good job. What word? Cat. Okay, that high-paced opportunities to respond and get feedback. I gave you the walking feet. This slide for your reference, and if you want to use it with your folks, actually shows how you're doing each one of these features of error correction. Okay, so it's step by step, it gives you that example. Okay, it's your turn. I want you to describe a naughty behavior. Think about it in your brain. It can be your favorite. And by favorite, I mean not favorite. And I want you to think how you would provide an error correction that meets our criteria. That meets our criteria. You respectfully address the kiddo, you say what didn't work, what you want them to do, and how you would immediately give them an opportunity to respond. And when they do it correctly, you say, that was great. Okay? So go ahead. You can do this as a pair or on your own. You're just going to come up with a naughty behavior you want kids to do differently, and you're going to tell me how you would do that. This is a great exercise for your staff. It turns out it can be kind of hard sometimes. Okay, go ahead and talk. Okay. Can I have one example? Is someone willing to give one example of a common naughty, in air quotes, behavior, and how you would use this error correction protocol to do it in a way that is evidence-based and non-shaming? Think of that. Who has an example they'd be willing to share? No one's willing to share. Oh, yes, there's a brave person in the back. Thank you.
I was just describing how in my class, I teach history, and so there's occasions where I like to lecture and talk about certain things that have happened historically. And I don't know if they're talking or if other students have done some research and are presenting their information, the expectation in my class is that you are paying attention and listening. And occasionally students will turn to their friend and begin to discuss something that maybe isn't along the lines of what we're doing. And so my strategy, or what I've tried to do along these lines, is typically I'll stop talking, I'll wait until they kind of realize I've stopped talking. I'll ask them if everything is okay, and then they'll usually be like, oh no, it's nothing. And then I'll just reiterate the behavior as far as, I need you to not talk while I'm up here talking so that you can hear what I'm saying and make sure you're paying attention. And then typically, and again, kind of learning from this, going forward more often, I'd like to once I'm done speaking, and there's an opportunity, I can say thank them for
Yes.
for being appropriate and for stopping the talking and that sort of thing. So,
Yes, that's very good.
yeah, that's just kind of an idea.
I like that, and that's a really excellent comment, because error correction, this takes up time, and it's certainly not the only way to get kids to tune in, right? So stopping and waiting, obviously they have respect or they would just keep going, right? So you've established that, which is great. Using proximity, pointing to your expectations, hey guys, right? We are reteaching a skill using this error correction, okay? So if in that moment it calls for reteaching, or in some cases just teaching, remember what Rob said to us this morning, don't correct it unless we've taught it. And I'm adding on to that by saying every response is a teaching, right? So we're going to use this to replace the, hey, knock it off, or no, you're wrong, right? Because we're teaching a skill. And when we frame this within our school-wide expectations, that gives us an additional foundation. And we've made agreements and we've taught it. And once I've taught it and the kids have done it, it will be much easier for me to use the, hey, we're Jessica, we're both Jessicas. Hey, Jessica, come on. Right? Then it's easier to have those using proximity, a little name dropping, saying, hey guys, I need everybody's attention. Because we've already taught it. We've built that foundation. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes students come from environments where, you try to show respect and you use those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And because they don't have the tools, they don't know how to accept
Bless
it.
you. Right.
So I had the kids working they were doing a little engagement and doing a little assignment. And I noticed the one student was off task and she was making some comments about what had happened at school. So I said, okay, everybody, I always say, welcome back. And then they say, it's good to be back. And so we started talking about whatever we were talking about. And then I said, I noticed you were carrying on about thus and so. And I said, you sound like a bully. And she said, well, such and such and such and such. And I said, well, bullies get bullied where I come from.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, oh.
Right.
I said, repeat that for me. She said, bullies get bullied where I come from. I said, you get me? She said, oh, yes, I got you. So sometimes you have to use those tools that they can understand.
You know your students. Mm-hmm. This is so important. And we don't have a lot of time because we have so many kiddos. What are the pieces you put in place to know your student? Like the excellent example, kids are not going to be engaged this day, and I know it, it's hard. So we are going to have trust-building exercises. We're going to talk about the things that and I don't want all of your teachers in your school to run wild and just do whatever they want. PBS teams and administrators, give them tools to create opportunities to respond for those types of engagement and relationship building with each other and with you. We will get farther when we have those relationships, and we don't want to just say, go build relationships. We want to give people structure to do that because they want them to be purposeful, and we don't want to leave kids out because we don't like them, they don't look like us, they're from a different place, et cetera, et cetera. We want to be very systematic, right? Because all of our children are worthwhile. And we want to give them equitable access to our attention, opportunities to respond in the content, to get feedback, and to get praise. Yes?
I've stopped using the phrase just opportunities to respond
Mm-hmm.
and added on correctly. Because
Yes.
that's where I see teachers really struggling and said, well, I tried that and it didn't work. Well, they didn't know.
Right.
So.
Yes, and that's exactly how we would describe it. The opportunities to respond correctly. Not just yell green when it's a numeric answer, right? We want them actually to be set up to have the correct answer. Because homework, unless you know it, you're actually, remember we said before, you're practicing incorrectly. Okay, so we have a little bit of time left, and I'm going to give you examples of error correction. And I know there are more slides in here than we could get through because I wanted to make sure if you are a coach, you have specific resources for building a professional development plan around these. Okay, so the second part, or like maybe the last third of the PowerPoint, is specifically for my coaches that need some more of that information. In order to coach it and do it, you really need to know what these practices are, right? Okay. So here's the learning line example, except now I've added, partners have answer keys to give immediate corrective feedback, okay? Teacher shows the response at the front of the room on cue. Okay, did you get this? Does your response include that you can ask those things? Raise your hand if you had this answer in the learning line. Raise your hand if you didn't have this answer in the learning line. Okay, so embedding immediate feedback within the examples we shared earlier. Closed reading. Teacher can provide correct pronunciation and ask a student to repeat, so if a kiddo doesn't get a word, right? Closed reading actually gives us a lot of chances to give an immediate corrective feedback if it's needed. So remember I said a teacher could ask a question, requires a one-word answer of all students, or just of a handful of students or one kiddo, and then the teacher can provide the immediate corrective feedback. And remember I said I want there to be an opportunity to respond immediately. So say that answer is actually Quebec. And then I would say the question, what's the answer? Everybody, Quebec. Great. Okay. So remember to embed the opportunity to practice correctly at the end of that error correction. Okay. If kiddos are using the red, green, and yellow cards to tell you where they are, you have to respond to that. Well, half my kids just held up a red card. Man, these are losers. It's actually incorrect, and we're not going to say that. We reteach, and we model, but we have the kids provide some, right? So model, lead, test, right? Models mean you're doing the whole thing. Lead is they're meeting you. What's the next word? What's the next step? Test is where they do it independently, okay? So you slow down, I'm getting confused. The teacher's gonna have to model with input. Or say to Arthur, who's our expert number 15, Arthur, can you please give us an example? How do we do this? Okay, so you have to respond when they let you know where they are. And your kids let you know where they are in their learning all the time, right? And you have to be set up to respond to do that. Okay, the think, pair, share. Kids can have an answer key. They can be a peer expert. They could write the best answer, grading rubric, share with another group, vote as a class. What if they had to provide rationale to the next group about why their answer is correct? Then they're doing the talking. They're doing the grading, right? They're engaged in that. Another variation is each group could get one item and then teach the rest of the class, right? Talked about technology. Praise is the last thing we're going to talk about, and then we'll hop out. Oh, it's 1:15. So contingent praise. Kids need to hear you say, I like how you did that thing. They need to hear a lot more than they do right now. Okay? We can connect this to the academic behaviors and the social behaviors that we want to see. Okay? We're not going to overpraise someone. We want it to be, if they're going to use it as a behavior change agent, it needs to be behavior specific, contingent upon the behavior we want to see. Okay? It has to be right away. It's like our grading. I can't wait till next Friday to tell Arthur he did a good job answering that question on Monday. Okay? You have been really, really fabulous. We are all done. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. We're transitioning to lunch, so don't be late to the lunch line. And make sure before you leave today, you provide some feedback on those little cards. Thank you very much.